Welcome back to the table, friends. I am your humble host, Grady Ems, and with me, as always, my co-host and co-conspirator, Owen.
Hello.
You are listening to Tabletop by Night, a weekly podcast where we continue our exploration of Vampire the Masquerade. Tonight, we gather around the table to answer the question, how can you serve the Ventrue?
Don't do it. That's what I say. There's much better masters out there.
It's not a question of why should you serve the Ventrue. How can you serve the Ventrue better? So today we're officially kicking off our dive into the various clans of Vampire the Masquerade. And boy, do we have just a wonderful start. Just the best start if you asked one of them. After all, they are the Clan of Kings.
And I mean, they're the first clan we're really starting out with, So, I mean, what better way to, promote and prove their greatness by being number one?
Start at the top.
That's right.
So, who are the Ventrue? The Ventrue have a long history of basically being one of the proudest clans. History is a funny word because vampiric history is largely controlled by the Ventrue. History and honor and dignity, or their weird dignitas, using the Latin term for some reason. It's very big. But anyway.
It's the face. Mother tongue.
Yeah, mother tongue. Essentially, face is the most important thing to Ventrue. A Ventrue needs to know at any given time they're standing in the room, and if they are not the top, then they need to have a plan to be there. So the Ventrue are a clan that is possessed by a sense of noblesse oblige, the noble obligation to help the lesser ones. We may not like the obligation itself. That may come in the form of a firm hand or
a firm hand.
Guiding principles that you may not agree with. But they're doing it to better them. They're better you. They're making life better for us little people.
Giuseppe, get me the switch.
Ultimately, at their heart, they do have a genuine belief that they know best for everyone. That is the core of the Ventrue ideology, is that not only is it their place to lead, but it is their right and obligation to do so because no one else could do it. So, Ventrue have long embraced from ranks of nobility and privilege. It's very rare that you're going to see the oppressed or the disenfranchised get picked up by Ventrue unless maybe that's part of the plan all along. Throughout history, they have been knights and warlords and noblemen and landowners. They have generally had a very firm control over their lineage. They generally embrace to further suit their needs, not just on a whim. Lately, however, that has shifted more to being more politician or CEO than warrior, more boardroom.
I mean, we don't really have like kings and queens anymore. We have CEOs that act as the king of their business.
Exactly.
The politicians that are, basically running the world. Like, it makes sense that they would be, the Ventrue, or they'd be the one pulling the strings.
Well, after all, I mean, if you're going to take the people who know how things should be done, they should be in the position to influence that, right? Yeah. So it should be no surprise to listeners now that the Ventrue are probably the most numerous of the Camarilla, and definitely the most numerous holding positions of power within them. They also largely responsible for the creation of the Masquerade and the rules, therefore. So the Masquerade is one of their most sacred tenets. Like I said, they're part of the act of ruling, or the act of guiding, is giving rules for others to follow, even if you yourself don't follow them.
Well, it's kind of that, don't look at the man behind the curtain sort of thing, where, they need to create the curtain in order that, they could control everything.
Oh, absolutely. So, as a Ventrue, as a member of the Clan of Kings, their blood offers certain advantages, also certain disadvantages. So they're going to be gifted in the disciplines of dominate, fortitude, and presence.
I mean, those all sound like I rule you type powers.
Very much so. Let's see. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about what that lens then. That'll maybe make a little more explanation now. some of these Ventrue can do what they've done throughout history. So let's take Dominate, for example. Dominate starts off as, well, really, all the disciplines essentially have a series of powers that you can get as you go deeper into their depths. Usually each level or dot of the discipline will have a couple different variations in the modern V5 system. And Dominate's much the same. So you have options when you're building a character, but these things basically tell you a lot about the clan and about the things that they've honed throughout the years. So 1 point in Dominate, right out of the gate, you're basically going to decide whether you want Cloud Memory or Compel. So Cloud Memory is a vampire can make the target forget the past few minutes. So already you're messing with people's brains.
I mean, that's convenient because they always say, like, your first impression's the most important. So if you walk up and you act like an idiot, you should be like, oh, rewind.
Let me redo this.
Yeah.
Let's take it from the top. And Compel, the Kindred can issue a short sentence commanding the target. So basically, if you can phrase it in a short sentence, the target will have to obey.
I mean, that seems really convenient.
Convenient.
Give me your keys and walk away.
Okay. Wonderful if you have both of them. Give me your keys, walk away, and forget this ever happened. So as you go up the next level, you're going to get abilities like Mesmerize. This is where you issue more complicated commands. Certain bloodlines and other clans will use the next one a little bit more, but dementation is something some of the Ventrue can have. You need to actually get Obfuscate too to be able to do it.
So this is like a combination of two abilities.
Yeah, and it's something that's a lot more, Malkavian than Ventrue, but find out that the Ventrue are not far from the Malkavians. There's another amalgam, which is a Slavish Devotion, where basically they can essentially empower the mind of one of their victims to resist other influences because you don't want your people to get swayed by the enemy.
That makes sense.
And they do things with altering the way blood-bonded thralls work too. So as the vampire grows in power, they also get things like the Forgetful Mind, where you can straight up mess with the memories of a person.
That's a favorite of mine.
It's a really great power.
That is a really great power.
Like, let's talk about what happened last night. Oh, really? You think you went over there? You didn't go over there. You were too busy microwaving one of those meals that you like. Oh, yeah, that was really good.
It was really good.
Submerge Directive, otherwise known as a trigger. Isn't that good?
Oh, those are beautiful. I mean, we've only used it a couple times in other games.
To great effect. And then you go up to things like, there's amalgams of Ancestral Dominion, but like Rationalize. Rationalize is a great one, which basically makes the victim internalize commands and not realize that they were compelled. So not only would you...
I thought of that.
Yeah, they're like, it just seemed like the thing I needed to do at the time. And then they have a crazy ability called Tabula Rasa, which basically turns the victim into a blank slate.
Yeah. That... I could see where that would be useful because, I mean, Dominate has abilities that let you implant memories in people's minds. So if you can wipe a person's mind out and create a completely different person altogether,
they wouldn't even know it.
Yeah.
They'd just be going through their lives, not realizing who they were or who they used to be. Mass Manipulation. There's another one. Basically, now we're getting to like the pinnacle of the craft. So this is where you're affecting multiple people.
Like these are the politicians standing up on stage, bellowing, their thoughts and ideas out to the people, up to the masses.
Exactly. The core tenets are being used now across greater numbers. And finally, Terminal Decree. Terminal Decree is, most of these abilities have a clause, which is that if what the Ventrue is telling you to do will cause immediate harm to yourself, you either can resist it straight up or you have a more chance to resist it. Terminal Decree does not suffer from that.
Oh.
If you want to tell someone to go jump off a cliff, they will go jump off the cliff.
I mean, this sounds like you start running into suicide bombers or something like this as well.
Very least, I mean, imagination can come up with some pretty crazy stuff. I don't know, people that like to drive trucks and
not stop.
There is no break. They just erase the break from his memory. So, Fortitude, we'll go through a little bit quicker. So Fortitude, they're going to do things like basically add health total, make you more resistant to mind control. As you go up, it's going to make you tougher, make During the Beast better. There's some amalgams with Potence that can kind of do some crazy stuff. You can eventually start getting tough enough to where you can defy your clan Bane.
Ooh. So what is the clan bane?
So a clan bane is basically, we'll go into the reasons why the clans have this in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But for Ventrue, the clan bane is basically, well, for all, the clan bane is something that, along with all these gifts, you come with restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
So the Ventrue, for example, have a clan bane in the new 5th edition that's called Refined Tastes. So when a Ventrue feeds, they must feed on a specific type. That may be a classification, like they only drink from streetworkers, or PhDs, or it may be limited down to actually a preferred victim, like I can only feed from this family. If they attempt to feed from anybody else, they have to literally spend willpower, a part of their essence, just to absorb the power of the blood.
That sounds relatable.
I guess we all have our own tastes. They also have a clan compulsion, which is basically like kind of the vice that they're supposed to do. Any guess what that might be?
No, let's hear it.
Arrogance.
No
way. Oh no, who could ever be that arrogant? Ventrue seem like such nice people. Like
the best people.
The best people.
That's what I've heard anyways. That's what everyone's told me.
I feel that deep inside and I don't know why. They're really great people. So Fortitude gets tougher, basically more resistant abilities. You can do things like you can bestow Fortitude onto other people with your blood, which is really great for making your ghouls more powerful. You can be so tough that basically weapons break when they hit you. And the pinnacle of Fortitude, you're starting to get basically where you do not suffer any penalties from any sort of physical damage as you go through. And Flesh of Marble, which is one of the great ones, is you just ignore the first source of damage during the night.
Oh, nice. So like if you're, I don't know, just sitting in your house and like an atomic bomb goes off, like technically you could survive that.
If it's not sunlight, you just survive.
Wow.
They literally try to pull the castle down on the Ventrue King and he just walks out. It's like, that fucking sucked. Not happy that I had to deal with that today.
So, I mean, all those things put together, it sounds like the Ventrue are pretty powerful, right?
Very powerful. Their third discipline is presence.
What does presence do?
Presence basically just magnifies their charismatic charms to other people. So the basic in the starting, you're going to do things like awe or daunt. So basically you'll either make people glow in awe of you or like take you seriously and slightly be threatened by you. They also have, you can gain bonuses if you fed off a victim before.
Oh, okay.
Because their charms are still fresh in the victim's mind. As you go higher up, you can basically inflict terror, or you can basically entrance, which is to add your presence to basically anything you're trying to do, whether you're trying to coerce, threaten, whatever like this. You have this build up of like basically your source of personality is now almost unyielding. There's some artist abilities that the Toreador more likely take advantage of, but they are within the realm of the Ventrue, is that they can create works of art that are so powerful that you literally succumb to their message. And then at the very highest marks of the manipulation of this ability, you basically have an inability for you to raise arms against them.
So
majesty.
Sanctuary, basically, in D&D terms.
Vampiric majesty. Cool too, the alternate to majesty is star magnetism, which means that you can actually use all these abilities through electronic media.
Nice. Now that sounds like something that Elon Musk is trying to...
That sounds something that podcasters would love to get a hold of.
I hope you're enjoying this podcast. If you're not, you should be enjoying this podcast.
Do you find yourself hungry for McDonald's right now? Get that pay. Let me get that pay.
When's the last time you had a Big Mac? So I do remember at some point in time, I'm not sure if we played the particular edition, but there was a point where a lot of the clans were kind of amalgamated into each other. Because wasn't Ventrue and Toreador just kind of mixed together into one clan for a while?
Not that I know of. So in Requiem, Ventrue and Deva were complete separate
clans. Was it Deva? Okay.
Ventrue remained, I think, so Deva basically took over for Toreador. But I think what you're also triggering, where you're thinking of, is some clans like Malkavians just became Ventrue.
Okay.
It became the Sons of Malkov, which was like a bloodline of Ventrue where they went crazy.
I see.
Toreador was a pretty straight connection to Deva. And then You had other weird ones like Mekit that popped up. That was like a weird mixture of Malkavian and Lasombra, but like turned into other weird stuff. As far as I know, Vampire the Masquerade, Ventrue have always been kind of one of the core straightforward clans.
Right. I was just thinking that like there was a point in time where they kind of just knocked everything down to like 5 or 6 clans, and they're like, these are the clans, and then they all just have offshoots that are what used to be the other clans.
That was Requiem.
Okay.
Yeah, Requiem was a little more straightforward. And then they just started writing extra stuff for it, and then you started introducing all these bloodlines that brought all that stuff back.
Right. I mean, because it's interesting. I don't know. It just reminds me of skill trees from like World of Warcraft, where it's like, oh, you have the marksman hunter and the survival hunter and the beastmaster hunter, but they're all hunters. And it's like, well, I mean, okay, but why don't we do different things?
Yeah. So speaking of differences between Requiem and Masquerade, so let's talk about like the core of the difference, which is Masquerade has history and myth.
Yeah.
So what is the myth about the Ventrue? So all the great clans have some leader, some core, usually an antediluvian. Sometimes it's a usurper. Ventrue absolutely have a antediluvian that essentially is the core of who they believe they should be. So all Ventrue have a relationship with this figure, whether they believe that the clan currently inhabits that figure's wishes and legacy. Maybe they think the clan is complete opposite of what that figure, of what the original Ventrue wanted. Maybe they think only they know, but like they all have this deep connection tracing back to Ventrue. Turns out a lot of clans, their founder antediluvians were different names. Ventrue was not. So there are many different mythos about Cain, the city of Enoch, and his first three childer. Most of them will settle on an agreement that one was known as the Wise. This was the great king that led Enoch, that basically ruled in Cain's stead or gave Cain the throne, depending on which version you're leading. There's also the Beautiful. Many versions thought that this was Cain's wife.
Okay.
And then the Strong, which was essentially the general of his armies or his right-hand man, these other things. So these three figures and all the mythos ruled the first city, which is the city of Enoch. Then Cain decided to do what most historical figures do if you write about them long enough and go fuck off for a while and like disappear. This led to the Great Three, or the original three, basically siring children. And those children are known as antediluvians, which literally translates as to before the flood.
Okay.
So, hint, foreshadowing. So, it is said that Ventrue, and especially the Ventrue, believe this, that Ventrue was the first of the antediluvians.
Oh, of course.
That he was sired to guide both Cain's rule, possibly over the Wise's rule too. There's some debate over who embraced him. Most connect to the Wise because I think Enosh is one of his names. But they believe that basically since he was the first king, Ventrue going to get that king.
Right.
But most of the stories lead to Ventrue either being chosen by them or being chosen by Cain as a right-hand ruler, officiant, general, the person who is going to be able to take control of the situation and guide things down the road to be in the right order. So they believe like Cain saw potential in him when he was still young, took him in, raised him as his own, and the Ventrue straight up believe that the rulership of the city of Enoch was given to him.
Okay.
Go figure. The Ventrue wholeheartedly believe that one of the last nights before the deluge, Cain came to Ventrue and said, basically entrusted his plans for the future with him.
Okay.
That he trusted the plans of all Cainites, meaning all Ventrue, and all kindred.
Right. So their thought is he basically showed up and he's like, here's the diagram, here's the breakdown, this is the flow of the way things are going to go.
This is the Szechuan secret sauce.
Yeah.
You can have this.
Right. And you're the one that is my hand that's going to shape this.
Dad left me in charge, guy.
I got you. My dad owns a dealership.
Of course, no proof of this, but of course, in Ventrue history, Ventrue is the last one to have seen Cain before he vanished.
You would say that.
Yeah. So after the deluge, after basically the flood and all these biblical events happen, the antediluvians decided that, maybe it's their time to shine. And so they rose up and devoured the three children of Cain,
so these people basically give them their unlife, then they say, hey, thanks, but, still kind of hungry.
Well, Daddy said that I could do this. Oh. He clearly left me in charge.
But this is all the antediluvians did this, or just certain ones?
So there comes a very important part of the discussion for the different various sects. Some people, especially some Ventrue, believe that Ventrue was the only one that abstained. Okay. Because, of course, no noble leader such as him would bloody his hands with turning on, the people that put him in position.
Yeah, but he's probably in the background going like, man, look at the neck on that guy.
Could you save me some a little bit? It's such goblet.
I mean, I'm not saying that we should, devour our sires, but, it might not be a bad idea.
Others actually believe that Ventrue was the one who led the revolt.
That sounds more right.
Yeah, I think that's the part of it. Basically, that he or she decided that, the only ones who could be trusted to rule, were those, that had the best chosen. Either way, the antediluvians rose up, took from Cain his childer, and Cain was not happy when he came back.
I wouldn't think so.
And so after he saw what they had done, he inflicted the banes on all their lands.
Okay.
So this is where we get this idea of a curse that is propagated throughout the blood. So this is where Ventrue was cursed with very specific habits as far as ingesting blood. He has tastes, and he can't deny them. That kind of thing.
See, I mean, that sounds strange to me, though, because it's just like, hey, Grandpa comes back and he finds out that the grandkids just killed Mom and Dad. And instead of ripping their throats out or something, he's just like, hey, from now on, I heard you like McDonald's. You can only have McDonald's.
Kind of. There is a sect of the Ventrue, which are the Antitribu.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Not
Antitribu.
Okay.
This is a term that we did not ever deal with because in our games, we didn't really deal with the Sabbat enough, but the Antitribu or that is how the word works. They are the members of the clans typically associated with the Camarilla who chose to go against and went with the Sabbat.
Okay.
So the Ventrue.
So they're the black sheep.
Exactly. Those are kind of interesting Ventrue because they're very much oh yeah, everything that's a part of our clan, we're going to flip and we're going to have this.
So it's the hot goth chick.
Yeah. Who decides that she's also the person who should be in charge.
Right.
Go figure. The Ventrue and Antitribu tend to be knights and paladins of the Sabbat. Because they must lead. They must show how to lead.
Gotcha.
They would just turn the Sabbat into the Camarilla after a while. I think that's why there is well, we may get into it later. The Lasombra basically keep them in check.
I bet they do.
Because they're yeah, I saw that before. That's not how we do things. So, a little history. So, whatever happened to, Ventrue, right? So, his siblings rose up. They all got a taste of that sweet, sweet second generation blood. They all got supercharged, got some powers, really cool. So, a fourth generation named Troil.
Okay.
Basically rose up and went after another one of the antediluvians. So not the third generation, but the fourth, one of Ventrue's brothers. And he had a brother who was, probably not the best friends with. He was a little stoic, maybe even had a problem with emotions. His name was Bruja.
Okay.
And his angry, passionate childer rose up and ate him.
Really?
Yes. And also attacked Ventrue and may have eaten him.
Okay, so this dude's just going buck wild.
Nom. So there's a lot of debate over when Ventrue departed the second city in search of Cain because he was like, hey, Dad, oh, shit got bad. I didn't do it, man. It wasn't me, okay?
Like, yes, it was my kid, but...
Yeah, look, okay. So we killed the people you put in charge, but we weren't responsible for our children eating us.
Right.
So, Dad, we need you to fix things. So a lot of them, including the Brujah, believe that basically Troial basically jumped Ventrue when he stepped out of the city and consumed it too.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of the others, obviously, like the Ventrue themselves, the Lasombra, even the Setites, they don't know, they have debates over whether or not this is how it is. And that was called into question a great deal more when all of a sudden people started finding Methuselahs who were basically fourth generation or fifth generation.
Oh.
Yeah. Fourth generation.
Okay.
And the only way they could be fourth generation was if Ventrue sired them.
Right.
So there's a lot of debate over whether or not he was actually killed. So the consensus seems to be in the lore that by today he's gone. Like he met his final end somewhere.
Okay.
And there are a host of Methuselah out there who basically claim lineage to him. So I'm sure.
Yeah. That's frightening.
Yeah. Especially with some of those abilities. Oh, I just got these spare points into fortitude. What are you going to do?
But I mean, that's one of the things with the Methuselah, though, too, isn't it while they sleep, the blood becomes less potent, so they're not as powerful when they wake up?
Yeah, to a little bit. Very important in Requiem. V5, not so much.
Okay.
In V5, this does happen. They have to thin out their blood a little, get everything like kind of reset, but they have a tendency to gain their power much quicker.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. It's like, I remember I could do this. And, okay.
The other thing V5 introduced, which I don't know if the older Masquerade did, is part of the process of basically the thinning of the blood, going through long periods of torpor, is that when they wake up, they're more susceptible to adapt socially to their environment.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit, where it's just like, instead of them showing up, they're like, what are these magic pictures? And it's like, oh, that's like some kind of electronic device that creates images on the screen. I don't know why I know that, but I know that.
Yeah, I got that. You have a Roman emperor show up and start thinking like, you know what, I'm going to wear those goth clothes and I'm going to go do, takes a picture. I'm going to go start a Twitch channel. So some notable things. I don't know if I skipped over this. Yeah, apparently I did, but that's cool.
What's that?
So things that become very important down the road. So these very long lists of the clan structure. So much clan structure to go through. Funny how the leaders have laws that they like to put into place.
I see.
So anyway, let's talk about some things that the Ventrue did. So the Ventrue worked their way into Rome.
Okay.
Now, prior to Rome, people who have a better understanding of history than I do would understand that the city-states of Greece were a more important thing. Hundreds, probably thousands of years, the city-states were the big dominant show of force in the area, and then eventually, as they got to infighting and collapse, Rome kind of took over.
Right.
So part of this was Carthage. And Carthage was, to the Brujah, like the perfect city. They basically found the perfect balance between the vampiric lords who ruled over the place, the sophisticated poets and philosophers who basically would debate with the mortals and come up with these perfect, balancing, they punch each other and get drunk at night, but like everything was like this perfect philosopher's warrior ideal place. So Carthage was a powerhouse, and the Ventrue basically during the city-state era moved into another city that was a trade town, but eventually that turned into them going and working their way into Rome. And when they got to Rome, when they started basically putting themselves into the Roman populace, they started learning that maybe being a vampire lord wasn't the best way to ensure you would live. But maybe being the guy who the senators all owed favors to was a far better way to manipulate the people. So this is where the Ventrue learned how to be Ventrue.
This sounds kind of Camarilla-ish.
Go figure, because one of the most famous vampires in Rome was Ventrue. I think her name is Camille, which is literally like her sire was the one who created the Camarilla. Well, these notes are gone, but So yeah, very much so. So the Ventrue honed their craft. If the first city and the second city, so Enoch and the second city were like their schooling And the Greek city-states were their rough high school years. Like, Rome is college. And they walk out and they're like, we got this. So one of the things they got is Carthage. No, it has to go away.
Yeah.
So a famous venture by, what's the name? Destroy. Open. Not that. Man. Thought I did these notes a little bit better. I apologize.
Just wait till you see mine.
I did look at it first. I was like, whoa. We're learning, people. We apologize. Did I just delete whole sections of this? Apparently I did. Oh, I see what happened. When I copied all that stuff about their structure, I copied it onto the people.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Anyway, someone is going to be, well, if we reach out to enough people listening to this, one of you is probably screaming out right now, wanting to shake me. A Ventrue 4th generation, maybe 5th generation. I think it's 4th generation. I think one of the most important 4th generations. She basically decided to sack Carthage. Now, not unsurprisingly, she died in the initial salvo because the Bruja are like not going to stand down without a fight.
No, I mean, that's kind of their thing.
Yeah. And fortitude kind of meeting with potence is kind of like the unstoppable force and the immovable object.
Right.
And there were a lot of Bruja who were like, no. But to this date, the Bruja do not forgive the Ventrue for what happened. That is kind of one of their clan things is the fall of Carthage is like the fall of their paradise.
Right.
So time goes on. Rome does eventually go the way of all the other great empires of the time, and the Ventrue have to figure out things to do. So they start moving into what it would eventually be like the Italy, the modern kind of Roman, power base. A bunch of them head up to like Spain and Italy and, Spain and France, stay in Italy. And a lot of them start pissing off the La Sombra. And the La Sombra start going, oh, we don't like these people coming in, and they're taking over castles and kingdoms and start bossing us around and stuff. So the La Sombra start a very long feud where they do not like the Ventrue. The La Sombra very much also believe that they are entitled to be the leaders of the flock. Maybe a little bit more on the religious side of stuff, but we'll explore that down the road. But like very much the shepherd versus the mayor kind of, the church official demanding that the city yields. So all that kind of goes into modern times where those same battles happen over boardrooms and public town halls. Which is one of the reasons too why when the La Sombra came to the Camarilla in modern times, they did so with such a spectacular show of obedience of like, I'm going to go find someone more powerful than me, stake them and bring them to you as an offering to let you understand that I'm very serious about this and that also you should never
look what I can do.
Yeah. I own the dark. I am the dark. So anyway, yeah. So that brings us roughly, we skip, 2,000 years and come up to modern nights.
I mean, nothing really happened during those 2.
No, we've already talked about Harstad, the younger and the older. You kind of get the idea. Ventrue have been there for the rest of vampiric history as the guiding forces. It's always a Ventrue talking to someone else in every pivotal event. So their clan, go figure, has a rich, very detailed structure because Ventrue like to make sure that you know your place.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. So in modern nights, the Ventrue elders have basically gotten together as a clan, and they have a clan structure, which is essentially their worldwide clan structure. And then there is a structure for any given city. So within the Ventrue clan, there is a leadership. You should always know your place because you should always know who you're talking to and how you're going to try to edge them out eventually. But like, these are important things. They basically trade not only in favors, but in dignity. So in standing, in faith.
In dignity or indignity?
In space dignity. They trade in dignity.
There's a difference.
Utter film. So the top of the clan, if we go into the global structure, the top of the clan is the foret. A lot of this stuff is basically pulled from Roman structure. So these are the Ventrue elders. So basically there is a clan of 12, or there's a council of 12 of the most powerful, influential Ventrue. These are the ones that probably most people think may be dead.
Okay.
No one's supposed to know who these 12 are, but those 12 seats are occupied, and those seats mean things. And they, of course, have a plethora of strategoi.
Okay.
It's hard for me to understand. I'm going to go with strategoi. Okay. Someone's probably also screaming about that. But they're like their agents. Gotcha. They're like the people basically that do all the moving, because the person in the chair is not going to basically do the actual manipulation.
If they even exist as a undead creature.
Yeah. So the strategoi are also simply called elders. They basically, if you're referring to a vampire elder in the Ventrue clan, you're probably not just referring to like, oh, that's Steve, the vampire elder who's 100 years old. You're probably like, oh, no, that's, Malkavian, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I know. Really, my brain couldn't come up with the word. No. That was Camarilla the First.
No. Camarilla the Younger.
Camarilla the Younger. But yeah, so they're basically the ones who serve all the higher ups, but they themselves are big players.
Quite high up.
If one of these elders comes into your town, you're like, oh my God, we're doing things. I don't care. I don't care what the prince says. We're doing things because these people. Turns out a lot of times the people who are in the same positions in the Ventrue are coincidentally part of the Camarilla and pretty high up in there too.
Mm-hmm. So they can show up and just be like, hey, Prince, I know this is your town, but we got to talk some business because they're Camarilla.
Yeah. They're oftentimes, they have the same authority as Justicars and stuff of the Camarilla, where the Camarilla will send somebody out to talk to you about, the Ventrue, so a subset, could also just send somebody out to go talk to you. Oftentimes they're in charge of large areas of land, so there may be a strategoi for the whole West Coast, and there's they're reporting to the 12, they're reporting to the higher ups, but also they're the person in charge who all the princes are talking to,
right? Even
not officially the Camarilla representative. So under that, there's basically a lictor. Lictor is basically intermediate rank among the internal structure of the Ventrue clan. So these are more like field operatives.
Okay.
So where the strategoi are basically going to be the people controlling large areas and delegating and making decisions and enforcing, the lictor are more like the people who are going to show up at your business. And they're going to say hey, I understand politics in this place. The prince has got some ideas and going on. But if you don't want the might of the entire Ventrue clan coming down, you're going to go sell me all this stuff.
We play fair.
Yeah. So there's no set number of them, but when a single strategoi can have multiple lictors, and they're just their agents. And obviously, the elders don't want to get their hands dirty.
Of course. They're busy doing big business.
Yes. They can be judge, jury, and oftentimes executioner for the clan. So finally, in the global clan, in the greater clan, there are the tribune. And the tribune are essentially the lowest ranks of the globe. I mean, if you're a tribune, it's really impressive from a city perspective. It carries with you a great deal of authority in places that you go. But if you're talking to the other members of the hierarchy, no one's going to really, you're not going to carry a lot of weight with you in comparison to, a lictor showing up or something like that. Probably talking about my ass there.
Turns out they're the most important people.
They're the most, but I mean, it's basically the lowest level of federal government coming and talking to you.
Right.
It's still the federal government.
Yeah.
So you're I'm in danger. I need to take this seriously. But when you're talking about within their social structure, it is the lowest ranking, and maybe amongst them, there's not a lot of respect and not a hierarchy to them. But they're definitely going to have a lot of power on the local level. So where the lictors are kind of like the hands of the elders, the enforcers, these guys are like the eyes and the ears.
Gotcha.
So they're going to be planted in positions where they can pass data up the food chain. They can basically tell, the greater clans, the clan structure, inform it what they need to know. Probably plants a lot of time, various positions. So, yeah. So then you go into actually, what does it look like within a city basis? In a city, there is a guiding council that basically runs the Ventrue of that city. So separate from the Camarilla, this is a Ventrue specifically organized group. I'm not even going to try to pronounce their name because in modern times they're called the Board.
Okay.
Gerosia.
Oh, that sounds perfect.
Gerosia. In modern times, they just call them the Board. You kind of get the idea that these are the eldest of the Ventrue in the city. So they're essentially a group that regulates clan policy within the city. They're who all the Ventrue are going to go talk to settle their affairs. They're who they're going to bring up grievances for. They're also who the higher ups, the lictors, the tribune, and everything are going to talk to when they first come to a city to basically say, hey, what's going on? What do we need to know? So within the local groups, the board is basically headed by a praetor who could be the prince. Okay. If the prince is a Ventrue, they probably are also the praetor. Otherwise, they're the head of the board. They're like the mouthpiece of the board. I cannot think of a situation where they wouldn't want to be the Primogen. Okay. Unless there's some, some obfuscation or, they're trying to build some distance.
Or somebody's being used as a figurehead.
Yeah, something like that. So they're going to they're going to bring issues to the rest of the board. They're going to kind of dictate the proceedings. There's also Idoles, who are basically like assistant managers. Like they literally call that out as this, but like they're basically the assistant to the assistant manager, the assistant to the manager.
The Dwights.
Yeah, they're the Dwights. They're going to be the people there who are going to basically facilitate they're probably going to do the most, right? They're going to facilitate contact amongst the clan. They're going to carry out things if they need to. They're going to basically handle the day-to-day, but they're not going to be the ones who are making the big decisions.
Gotcha.
And then there's the questors who basically act as assistants for the elders. So questors are basically the people who have gained some measure of favor. And that favor gives them a title, but very little else. And then basically everybody else, who is just everybody without a formal title, are called the Irin, and they're just Ventrue who do not have a title.
Okay.
So if you're a local Ventrue, you step into the scene, you're just a schmuck. You're just a everyday, and technically you're an Irin, that's like your rank. But basically, you're probably not even going to be brought in front of the board unless you did something wrong. Hope after maybe dozens of years, hundreds of years, you earn enough kind of credit to become a questor. And then maybe like now you have a little bit of sway in your hood and you can kind of say, hey, I'm doing your bidding here. So you should also listen to my opinion. There we go. There's the notable. Artemis.
Okay.
Artemis was the childer of the Ventrue Antediluvian, and she ruled over ancient Sparta.
Oh, wow.
So Artemis convinced all the Spartans that she was their god. Hence, Artemis.
Gotcha.
Also, Mithras, who was a fourth generation. Once again, he was one of the sired by the Antediluvian. King Mithras he actually ruled for centuries in Europe and eventually became the Prince of London and the monarch of the baronies of Avalon in the Dark Ages books. There was Alexander, but not the good one. Wow. Alexander of Paris.
Alexander the plenty good enough.
Alexander of Paris for being longtime prince of the city after the fall of Rome. He was also a fourth generation. He was in ancient Greece and ultimately destroyed. He was basically destroyed by a gangrel warlord.
They tend to do that.
Yeah. Lysander. That's a name I didn't expect to hear.
Yeah.
He was a fifth generation, but he was a Greek Ventrue, and he was essentially the general that was in charge of the destruction of Carthage.
Okay.
So Lysander is like, Bruja are bad. Like, if you're a Bruja and someone rolls up to the table with some Imperial fists and some 40K, you're going to pick that model up and you're going to chunk it to the wall. Artemis is the one that, like, decreed or like led to the sacking of Carthage and then died during the initial she was wiped out at the beginning. So that brings about an end to my notes. Thank you for suffering through that as we learn how to get better here. So all this history, what makes a good Ventrue character a Ventrue, like a good Ventrue, as opposed to just a character who happens to be a Ventrue?
In my opinion, a really good Ventrue is a very manipulative, very cunning person, but at the same time, no one really knows that. They're the person that's like, hey, I got you. We'll take care of this. This is a good idea. We should go with this plan. But like everything is, just kind of like these little nudges and pokes and things like that. They're kind of just pushing you in a particular direction. And at the same time, it's like, it's their idea, but you thought of it. I'm just here to help you out and, grease the wheels, shake the hands and stuff like that.
Manipulation tactic ever.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they're the used car salesman, in my opinion.
It's interesting. Yeah. I think that's definitely the skill set they need to sort of
yes. I mean, they might not come off as scummy as a used car salesman, but to you and I, as outward people that would bump into a Ventrue, like we wouldn't be like, oh God, it's one of those guys. But like other vampires, they're probably straight up. It's just like, oh God, it's Gil. He's going to try to sell me on some plan that he's got. And, I'm not going to be able to turn it down because, he's going to be in my brain. You can't, do anything, but that's my opinion of it.
Yeah. I think the difference between them and the other clans that offer manipulation is that the Ventrue do it out of a place of thinking that they're doing it because that's the best way to think that things should get done. So they're absolutely, I mean, all vampires are self-certain.
Oh, absolutely.
But Ventrue are more inclined to basically think like, oh, if someone doesn't lead these people, this is going to go bad, so I should do it. Now, the manner in which they do it may be like the used car salesman thing. But I think there's always, and it's kind of built into their compulsion, is there's always this element of arrogance in there that like when stuff really hits the table, like they believe that.
Well, I to take that a step further, I think it's more of, if someone doesn't, lead this, things are going to go bad. Oh, Jimmy wants to lead it? No, it shouldn't be Jimmy.
Or the only reason Jimmy's going to lead it is because I'm letting him lead it.
Right.
And that's probably best for everybody.
Yeah.
Jimmy, here's how you should do it.
Yeah. It's like, Jimmy, let's go have a talk in the back room for a minute.
Yeah.
Let's make sure you've got this thought out the way it should be.
So another interesting tidbit that got erased in my notes was very interesting is that a lot of the Ventures went into Russia. And basically during the Cold War, Ventrue on both sides were basically gaining massive amounts of wealth, massive amounts of influence due to the like warmongering and the fear-mongering state. But when Russia collapsed, or when the Soviet Union collapsed into Russia, a lot of them basically didn't have that official backing anymore. So they had to find other ways to basically regain that power. And they did so through crime. So technically, like, I had a pretty good in on Yanos. I'm realizing that is a very big important thing.
It's like these are all the oligarchs that are hanging out in Russia now.
Pretty much. So yeah, I think that's the whole big thing with the Ventrue, where Toreador or, well, it could be Malkavian, even a Bruja, basically, they're all different manipulators. Some of them thinking like, well, I should lead because I know the best thing to do. The Ventrue are not like, well, like that ideal is the best ideal. They're like, I have to steer the ship because only my hand can be trusted to steer the ship.
No one else can do it as well.
Yeah. I think that always needs to shine in your character. You were chosen for a reason. So your sire, unless they were like punished or pressured into siring you for some reason, they probably chose you because you showed some of that. So if you make that twist, that kind of like, how are you leading and what way is it? Because I mean, it could be easy as a couple podcasters who are like, hey guys, we're going to teach you the proper way to play a game. That would be a very Ventrue thing, right?
You guys shouldn't listen to anything we're telling you.
You've already listened to too long. I've had at least 3 successes during this whole, I got those triggers in, man. Just you wait. So yeah, like that angle of like that, the duality of I lead because it is my burden to lead because only I can. And then also like, I'm doing it for the little people. Like, I think those are the two greatest parts of like, just, and yet if you look at their powers, it's so obvious that they're all just like, I'm incredibly magnetic and you must do what I say and you can't kill me. Like they're the most annoying kid on the planet. Like, but that doesn't mean they're not going to be fun.
No, the manipulation is always fun in vampire games.
And I think your your initial reaction to it is kind of what the group will eventually evolve to. Is you play enough of Vampire and you inherently kind of develop this aversion to Ventrue because you've been on the receiving side.
Right, right. And sometimes it's fun to be the implementer of that, dickishness.
100%. And also to watch people do it too. Just like, oh, wow.
And sometimes it's just the threat of doing it that's pretty fun as well.
Yeah. I think one of the greatest examples of like really what it's like to be under the thumb of a Ventrue is that the game Vampire the Bloodlines, when you go to try to like say no to the prince and he's like, no, you're doing it. And you just lose the option to say no. And you're like, oh man, like that's the kind of unfair. It's not this scripted flowery, like I walk out of there and feel like I had a good time and I was manipulated. You just walk out and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do it. I guess
there was no other choice. Literally, there was no other choice.
Yeah, the only mercy is if they use the ability where they think you came up with the idea.
Yeah.
like, oh, maybe it was a good idea after all. Yeah, I think that's, I think we've covered the topic pretty well. I think that's...
Yeah, I think we have.
I love Ventrue. I think you should all play them. I think you should all love to play them. And maybe,
as long as you play them the correct way.
Yeah. Yes. So some of our long-term listeners probably know that, yeah, do not play moral Ventrue.
No.
There you go.
Yeah.
We don't need to rehash that, but let me tell you that if you want to have a good time, you don't have to be a bastard, but you can't be a saint if you're
no. I mean, that's kind of across the board. I mean, there's literally only like probably one clan that could honestly be called like selfless. And we'll talk about how they got devoured in the next podcast.
Nice. It's a good segue. I do think it'd be very interesting to be a selfless like Nosferatu.
Like, I mean, it kind of feels like they would be the clan that kind of leans towards it because it's just like, I got this rough hand in life. And
a prince of the sewers.
Yeah.
A living saint of the homeless. But technically, I think we've already met that guy.
Yeah, we did meet that guy. He wasn't a saint.
No, he wasn't. All right. Well, we can go on forever talking about our favorite clans, but the show has to come to an end at some point, and we have other things to discuss. So unless you got anything to bring up, I think we can say goodbye.
No, I think we're good. And I hope you enjoyed the structure of this podcast today, because the next one is not going to be very straightforward, I'm afraid.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We will talk to you later.